You focused on Gitmo, which interested us because I haven't heard anybody talk about Gitmo for a long time. First of all, it's still there.
Still there.
How many people still there?
41.
Only 41. At
Yeah.
one time, it was up to like about 400.
780.
Really?
At the height of Bush administration.
Yeah.
Bush cleared out a lot of people.
And who are these 41?
You've got about 13, I believe, who are facing charges before the military commissions, which is the war court over in Guantanamo. Just to give you a sense of where those cases stand, 5 of those 13 are the guys accused of planning 9/11. I believe they were arraigned in 2014, but don't hold me to that.
Yeah, but
anyways, they're still in pretrial proceedings.
But they've been there since 2001
or 2002 in some cases.
Right.
But they're still in pretrial proceedings. This is years in, and they haven't even gotten to trial. I mean, these cases are a complete disaster. The evidence against a lot of these guys is sort of tainted by the use of torture. And more so, the military commission system just it's not a very experienced system. It hasn't been tested very much. It's not like the federal courts where we try people in Article 2 courts all the time for terrorism. It takes about a year or two. They're usually put away for life. And that's that. It's this very convoluted, tricky system where every single time the lawyers and the judges and the families and everyone are shipped out to Guantanamo on this plane, you spend the whole time just arguing about the smallest procedural details because there isn't this precedent in place the way you have it in federal court. So that's 13 of the guys. The rest are sort of a mix of, there's 5 guys there who were actually cleared for release before Trump came into office. It was this very complicated interagency process where all these officials said, these guys don't really present a terror threat anymore. We can release them.
But they haven't found anybody who will take them.
Or they, in some cases, just couldn't get all the sign-offs done in time before Trump came into office. You have to notify Congress a certain amount of time. You have to get everything in place.
Yeah.
And at least one case, this guy was very, very close. There was a country that was going to take him. It just couldn't come together in time. And now they're just sort of sitting there waiting forever because Trump has implied that he doesn't plan to release anyone. And then you have a couple dozen people probably who are sort of in this in-between place where there's not enough evidence to even bring charges against them in this war court. But the government still sort of thinks like maybe you have ties to Al-Qaeda, maybe you're scary, maybe we don't want you back on the battlefield. Maybe you're from a country like Yemen where it's not exactly safe or stable enough to send you back there. And these guys are kind of just screwed.
So they've been there for 16 years and no charges have been filed against them and they're just rotting in hell.
Just rotting in hell.
Yeah.
I still
unbelievable.
When I see these headlines about Gitmo, I can't believe we're still talking about Gitmo.
Yeah.
I can't believe we made it through all 8 years of President Barack Obama.
And Barack Obama, who promised a couple of days after he was sworn in that Gitmo would be gone within a year.
And here it is.
And, I mean, he didn't get any he was blocked by doing that from Congress, but here it is. And now there's no move or inclination on the part of this administration to shut down Gitmo in any way.
I mean, there's talk of expanding it, sending Americans there to be tried at Gitmo.
So we have 41 people. Any idea what it's costing us? That's a huge
I haven't looked
facility.
At the figures in a while, but I want to say it was over $200,000 a person a year compared to a federal court like a Supermax.
Yeah.
It's closer to like $40,000. I mean, it's astronomical. And the problem too is that the cost. It's not like when you send someone away, the cost decreases by that much because there's a certain baseline cost that just exists to keep the prison open. You have to ship in all this food from offshore.
Sure.
Every time you, construct the war court, construct a cafeteria, all those supplies have to get shipped in. And they all have to be constructed. It's called an expeditious mission. So it's temporary, it's quick. You don't build these structures to last forever because the military was tasked with setting up this temporary sort of prison. And you're in the middle of this hurricane zone where all these structures every few years are falling apart and they need these major repairs because the military hasn't, maybe they will be now, but under Obama and Bush, they weren't tasked with building these like super secure buildings that were going to last forever because we weren't supposed to be there forever. And keeping a temporary system alive for, over a decade is quite expensive, as we're learning.
The other thing, the idea that we have to have Gitmo because there are no federal prisons that are capable of holding these people in a secure fashion is just absolute bunk.
Yeah.
I mean, the federal prisons today.
You're not getting out.
You're not getting out. Right.
And we have
and it would be a lot, as you
of
say,
terrorists who are accused of plotting major terrorist attacks in the U.S. on U.S. soil.
In those prisons.
And nobody thinks about them. You don't hear the people near, ADX and Florence being like, oh, God, I hope Gaylani doesn't get out of prison and come, blow up my house. They get tried, they're done, and they're out of the news. It's done.
Right, and they are. They're buried, they're forgotten, and they'll never be heard from again. And they ain't getting out. And it would be so much cheaper to take those 41 or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying they all deserve that, but just to move them from there to.
The problem,
I forget the names of these federal prisons,
right.
But
the problem with a lot of these guys is that you probably couldn't just put all 41 of them in prison, because in the U.S. at least you can't really put guys in prison for life unless they've been found guilty of a crime. So the fear is once you move them to U.S. and you don't have this sort of legal gray area.
Then God forbid the American justice system might kick in, that we might actually have to.
It's more
perform and live up to our legal obligations.
Right. It's
God
more
forbid.
realistic that they would be transferred to a military brig down south, where they could still be held under this military detention authority, law of war authority, which says, you can detain individuals to keep them off the battlefield as long as this battle is still in place. And of course, as our listeners probably know, we say that the 2001 authorization for the use of military force is still valid for the fight against ISIS, and therefore anyone who was picked up after 9/11 and we think was remotely connected with the Taliban or Al-Qaeda, we can basically hold until we're done with those guys, which, we'll see when that happens.
Right.